Oh, we Seth.
Oh, okay, we're live.
We can say
You
hi to
want to double
Seth.
check with anybody?
We know that one of the
We're live.
88 people watching is
I
Seth,
believe we're live.
So we think we're live. We just gonna.
until he starts getting emails. Seth, you can tell him if we're not live.
I think we're live. We're on YouTube. Okay, so we're back. We had a live stream issue.
Yeah.
I had just asked Mark Collins about who distributes LIHTC capacity.
Yes.
Yes, that's a good
So that's
question. I'm not sure.
VHFA does, folks have applied to our board. There's some LIHTC is the low income housing tax credit program. It's the largest source of federal funds to create and support rental affordable housing. Once a year, we hand out in the spring the really competitive LIHTC money that is very valuable, that pays for about 70% of a building when there's a project being developed. But every month, we also award a different kind of LIHTC. There's two kinds of LIHTC. A really valuable one that's so competitive and you have to jump through so many hoops that we give it all out in one meeting. And then the other one that every month we entertain applications, and that one is less valuable, same program, but it'll only pay for about 35% of a building's development costs. Either way, there's a gap. Either way, you need VHCB money, you need HUD money, rural development, and all that. Because all developers stack together 6 to 8 funding sources to make a project work. The reason I think most people think of Evernorth as receiving most of the LIHTC awards is that they're a co-developer with the regional partners like the Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust or Champaign Housing Trust or Downstreet, and together they apply. And so they almost get counted extra, for each regional area where a nonprofit is developing. But there are private for-profit developers who also are LIHTC developers. You heard from Zeke Davison from Summit Properties a week or so ago, and they do this. The Dusevich Company, the Snyder Braverman. There are several private for-profit developers. St. Albans and Morrisville, we're seeing more activity. And not to put words in Zach's mouth, but I think what Zach was saying was that there need to be more inroads and on-ramps to becoming a LIHTC developer. That program is obnoxiously complex from the federal standpoint, not a VHFA thing, but we do get nervous about folks joining that program before they really know what they've jumped into. But this program is designed to be that kind of on-ramp.
Senator Crooks.
Okay, so forgive me, but I know the financing of this cold. So if in this first valuable tranche, the LIHTC can pay up to 70% of what cost, the entire cost of the project?
The total development cost to build the project, not to operate it ongoing. But if you don't have a big mortgage and you haven't taken on a lot of debt, then those operating costs are lower.
So so that's a lot of money to give to a private developer who's going to be privately profiting from this. And yes, I know we as a community, as a state, benefit from having lower income people there. That's a lot of financing for a private developer, just saying.
Yeah.
And who benefits? The question I had never realized it was that high. I guess the quid pro quo is we get affordable housing from what percent of area median income down? Up to 120?
Nope, 60% of median income.
This is lower income.
Yep, this is low income.
Lower income.
And that when the tax credits pay for 70% of a building, there's only 4 or 5 projects we can do a year like that. And those projects, again, have to jump through so many hoops. They're perpetually affordable.
Right.
They're 25% of the units are serving the homeless. They are the kind of deeply subsidized, mission-rich policy goal projects that you think of. And I want to be clear, some of those are being done by private developers, for-profit developers, and they're held to the same standards as nonprofits and following all the same rules. The lesser valuable credits is the program that would likely pair with what we're talking about today. We are not building this program as if it's a funding source for those. If 70% of your projects are paid for by tax credits and there's a path for those projects, we're trying to get more of the lesser valuable credits funded and moving forward, because they've been moving recently because of all the ARPA money. But once the ARPA money goes away, we need a way to keep using those less valuable credits. And we have a long history of not taking advantage of all those credits. Treasurer Pierce had a report on this. There's a lot of people who've been saying we're some of this money is expiring and we're not necessarily sending it back to the feds, but we're not fully utilizing it. And this is a way to utilize it after the behemoth of ARPA is over.
Got it. And critically important, we never want to leave federal money on the table. Is your vision that this revolving loan fund will be able to finance that 65% gap?
No, not the entire thing.
Yeah,
And I'll get into
that's
that
what I thought.
design when it's my turn.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, thanks. That was very helpful.
So I found this valuable. I just wanted to make sure I've heard informally a lot about LIHTC access, and I just wanted to refresh all of our memories of how that works, but really appreciate the perspective and everything you're doing down there in Southern Vermont. So thank you. And it's nice to hear there's a local revolving loan fund down there as well. We don't know how many of those exist. So feel free to, we can ask questions of anyone here. We do have to move on to our next witnesses.
Can I just quickly ask Shannon the source of, Shannon, may I just ask you, do you have a 1% local option tax? Is that how you finance your community loan?
No, I believe that fund has been around since the 80s, and it came through, kind of leftover HUD money, and then this revolving loan fund was created, and it's been going since then. But we are trying to, I think when you look at which communities have passed the 1% option tax, it usually takes a couple of times to convince everyone. So we're working on that.
Okay, thanks.
If I could just mention one more thing real quick, going back to the 70% of development costs being awarded to a private developer. I understand that seems like a lot. I just want to point out that we've done a couple projects, for example, an 11 unit in Bennington that cost $1.6 million to develop. And at the end of the day, the property was only worth $600,000. And so there's about a $1 million gap there in this development. And so that 70% that's being provided is help closing that gap. And additionally, when it comes to then operating that building, taking out so much debt, we can only leverage that debt for 75% of that $600,000 value. And then, it's important to keep that as low as we can so we can keep operations, the cost low so that we can pay, reinvest money back into those properties, in addition to growing the portfolio and reinvesting money into properties that really need it, because those nicer properties help support that.
If you want to move
How
on.
did they use VHIP? Did they use VHIP? That's just a yes or no question.
Yeah, we
Did you use VHIP?
We've done over.
Did you use our Vermont Housing Incentive Program money?
The VHIP, we did all of the rehousing recovery funding, and we've done over 25 units with VHIP as of right now.
Great. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks. Great.
So I wanted to add one thing. So with this revolving loan program, it's actually, our business model is to add units to buildings that we already own that have been kind of cobbed together 50 years ago, and really to try to lay them out better so that they're more appropriate units. If we were participating in this revolving loan, it's going to, that Act 250 rule of 1055 is actually going to be more of an obstacle for us. I mean, since we've been doing the VHIP program, we've added 8 units. We have another 2 that are in the pipeline right now, and it's putting us up against the ceiling that's going to actually slow down our program of adding more units. And with this program allowing us to do even more, it's going to be more of an obstacle to actually get these units online.
That's helpful to hear. We do try and address that a little bit with a doubling of the cap in our bill. So thanks for mentioning that. Peter Kahn and Son, I don't know, remind me your Jackson. I don't know, you can both come forward if you like, or.
You can chime in. All right.
And Maura, I think we're just gonna eat into your time.
Okay, hi, Peter Kahn. I've been building and selling homes in Vermont for 25 years. And I'd like to talk this morning about a project we've been working on in Vergennes.
Huh?
So this is a 50 single family home project, half acre lot, 60 acres of common land, walking distance on a sidewalk right into the city, right into downtown. We started in 2016. This is a project without any subsidies. We were trying to hit the middle of the market. That was our intent when we started. So people with essentially moderate income. We made our first sale in 2016. The purchase price of that house was $291,000. That's a real single family house, 2 bathrooms, nice lot, city sidewalks, city roads.
On water and sewer.
What's that?
On water and sewer.
Water, sewer, yeah, now natural gas as well. Couple works locally, so one works at Woodchuck Cider in Middlebury, the other one works for a clothing store right in town. Next several years, prices went up for construction modestly. We were able to stay in the 300s price-wise, and we developed a neighborhood with owners in virtually all stages of life, from young couples before children, others having babies, families with kids in the elementary and the high school, and retirees. There's a real nice mix. On really any given day, you can go into the neighborhood and see a real community. Kids riding bikes around and people mowing lawns, walking dogs, just a real nice sense. There was a time where I was in town eating, having brunch with my wife outside. There's a lot of nice restaurants in town. And up came a couple with a stroller and introduced us to their baby. And I was like, wow, these are people from our neighborhood who walked in on sidewalks we built and are part of this greater community. So then the pandemic happened and things did definitely change, and everything you've heard about sort of like unbelievable price increases are accurate. Where our framing materials essentially tripled, windows, siding, roofing, cabinetry, flooring, sheetrock, paving, everything, it went up a lot. 2 times is about right for that. And labor also got a lot more expensive. Our framer gets double what he got, double today than what he was getting for the first houses. Electricians more than double. The plumbers almost triple. We do have AC now, so that's the guys, but it's still it's almost triple. And site work is also almost double. So just building a house now costs us more than the house, the lot, the infrastructure, the roads, holding costs, finance costs. That whole package, just the house now costs more than that when we started. So prices went from the 300s and we're now in the 600s. Same neighborhood, still making sales, but the demographic of that buyer has definitely changed. So we're seeing with especially the interest rate rise, a lot of our buyers now don't get financing. They're coming in with cash, and most of those buyers are essentially more well-off retirees. They've sold their house, have the money to buy a house without financing. Our last 5 sales, all in essentially the last year, 3 of those are to families or to retirees, no financing. 1 is probably a 3rd home, and it has not been occupied. It closed a year ago. They never actually lived in the house. Families in the neighborhood have on more than one occasion come up to me and express that gratitude that they purchased when they did, because they just would not be able to do that now. The couple with the baby sold their house. They moved out of state. The purchaser was a retiree. So the complexion, we appreciate every buyer in our neighborhood, but the demographic is changing significantly. About a year ago, we switched gears. I mean, this is an ongoing project, but then we started pursuing a multifamily dwelling. So we do construction also in Vergennes, and we penciled it out. Again, we build to the market. The market rate rental in Vergennes, we think is essentially what workforce housing would be, those rental levels. So again, without subsidies or assistance, that math worked. It wasn't not hugely profitable, but it did work last spring. Since then, you know, like the worst must be over, right? Prices have doubled. Prices have still increased. Lumber has come down for sure. That does help, but everything else is still going up. So cost of construction from the last year, interest rates, obviously we all know about that, you know, more than double now. It doesn't work anymore. The same project just does not work without subsidy. So looking at, and we're finishing our permits, we're real close on that. But it's like a no-go. We're just not going to come out of the ground with that at this point. Without some sort of assistance, we applied for, this is the first time we've done this, but we applied for the CRRP grant a couple weeks ago.
Department of Economic Development is putting out the Community Revitalization and Recovery Program.
It's what we called
Yeah.
our capital improvement.
Okay,
But
yeah.
yes, it is
Is
our,
that the same one?
That would make this project work. And that's 20%.
and that's a grant. That's a straight
That's a grant. That's a straight up grant. So.
That's our, yeah.
Yep, so we're waiting to hear on that. That would make this project work. We're used to doing this thing without any assistance. So we don't need essentially layers of assistance, but a little bit just sort of tips the scales. That's a 20% grant. That would be wonderful. We're waiting to hear on that. Seth sent me this, the revolving loan fund. That also works. So that's not a grant, obviously. That's just a much lower interest rate for part of the construction of the project. That lower interest rate is significant enough that it will offset our cost of construction. And again, that works as well as a straight up grant. And it seems like a really well thought out, nice program, especially since it's revolving. So it's repeatable. And if it's $20 million, I mean, ultimately, and for a certain amount of time, if it's $20 million goes in every year, then eventually that doesn't need to keep happening. So there's a limit, sort of, this is your department, but there's a limit to how much the state needs to fund.
Right.
And then it just keeps going. So I think it's a great program. And again, since we're used to running things very, very tightly, because ultimately we do need to make a profit at the end of the project.
We appreciate that.
So thank you.
I wasn't
That's the
disparaging
goal.
of that. I was just 70%.
Well, there's an efficiency. I'm just going to say, when I see unit numbers for these bigger subsidized projects, I'm blown away at the cost. Like because I think there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of other things that have to happen to achieve these grants that we don't deal with. And so our unit cost is I'm just gonna say much lower, like shockingly lower when I pencil out this and compare it to the sort of average price of producing a unit in the state. That makes, like, I think I don't know if it's an advantage, but we don't need just that program, just the program with no LITC, it would make this project work.
No. And sometimes revolving loan funds do need continual support until they revolve.
Yes, exactly right. But there seems like there's a limit then.
Yes.
That's what's a really nice
No,
thing. It's survivable after it's funded for X number of years. When the principal comes back, then you start again. So it seems like I'm new to this world, but this seems like a really good one as opposed to like a straight up grant, which then the money runs out.
Senator Harris.
Yeah, just a couple questions.
Sure, yeah.
Right. So the first development that you talked about were, how many units?
That's 50 single family.
50 single family. Okay, one of the things we're looking at is having duplexes be allowed wherever single family homes.
Oh, interesting.
So would
Yeah.
that help you to make that pencil out under today's circumstances?
So I mean, it's still working. It's still, we're just in this different world.
Right, but would that
Not
help
one
you?
that we intended to be in. So
Yeah.
that would supersede. So the zoning on this project
Yeah.
for sure is straight up duplex is not allowed, single family only.
Right,
Like that's the city's rules for that piece of that region. And so you're talking about
so if
superseding.
that were changed, right, so that the
Duplex
city
by right.
had to do
I
duplex,
Yeah,
could you still get the families in there, do you think?
yeah, that would definitely help. Yeah, because then our lot cost is split in half.
Yeah,
And then there's some efficiency, especially if you have attached. I will say in the general marketplaces, people in other neighborhoods where we've had duplexes attached, like they're traditional, if we separate them by 8 feet and make 2 different buildings, people like that a lot better.
interesting.
So as opposed to a duplex, so I guess I would say if there was a way to say you could do 2, so there is accessory buildings.
Yes.
Which I've
ADUs, yeah.
never done. But if it was 2 structures, like maybe something that they don't have to be physically attached, because those are far more appealing. There's just a mental block when you're sharing a wall
That's just America.
in
The rest of the
America.
rest of the world
Yeah,
appreciates the fact
yes.
that that's actually energy efficient.
Okay, that's a good point.
So
It is more energy efficient.
I'm
yeah.
just gonna take chair's prerogative, and if you can stay for questions, we're all busy, but we do have a hospital CEO who we're
Oh, sure.
running behind on, and I really want to make sure of the busy people in the world, I think hospital CEOs are among the top. So I just want to get to him, and then we can take questions.
Sure, do you want me to hang out then?
Yeah, is that all right?
Okay,
Yeah,
no
if you
problem.
could,
Yeah.
and you can stay where you are.
Okay.
There's not a lot of chairs
Okay.
behind you anymore.
Because he's right up there.
Hi, Mr. Tester. Sorry to be a little late, and we'd love to hear from you.
All right, thank you. Do I need to do any swearing in or just start talking?
We see your name and title, but you might want to repeat that again.
Okay, you got it. Good. First off, I want to say I feel a little guilty bumping a builder because, we've got a major project going on right here. One of the most important things for them is to stay on schedule. So I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, I want to thank you all for giving me an opportunity to speak today. My name is Sean Tester. I am CEO of Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital. I've got some prepared remarks, so I'll try to go through those with you, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Kind of really invested here in the Northeast Kingdom. Not only am I CEO of the hospital, but I'm also a trustee of the Vermont State College System. I'm a trustee of the Northeast Kingdom Collaborative, and I'm a director of Passumpsic Savings Bank. So I see this from issue from a lot of different angles. And I have to say that when I stepped into the role of CEO here, I never imagined that I would be spending so much of my time dealing with housing issues. It's really been mind-blowing to me. And I thought I could start by just putting a little of this in perspective. And I know I'm probably a little bit preaching to the choir here, but here in the Northeast Kingdom, we have amazing job opportunities, right? A few weeks ago for the NEK Day at the State House, I pulled some numbers from area healthcare institutions to look at the open positions, job opportunities within the Northeast Kingdom. And to just give you a sense of the scope of this, as of mid-January, NVRH had 73 job openings. That's 10% of my workforce. North Country Hospital had 83 job openings. Northern Counties Healthcare, our federally qualified health center, had 22 job openings. And our nursing homes had in excess of 50 job openings. So you add that up, that's a couple hundred job openings, and that's just in healthcare in the Northeast Kingdom. I also know from speaking to my colleagues across industries that the workforce needs in education, banking and business, manufacturing and engineering are just as acute here in our rural part of the state. You know, I think we're all working hard to support our education system, to train the people who live here for these amazing jobs, and we're going to continue to do that. But the hard reality is we simply don't have the population and the workforce here to fill all the needs within our communities. That means that we need to attract people to the area, and that means we need, you guessed it, housing, right? The timing of this couldn't be better because I'd like to share with you a little story that just happened on Monday. So we have a couple openings in our emergency department, and one of them is for an advanced practice provider. So on Monday, we interviewed a physician's assistant who's interested in the job. He is currently in Bangor, Maine, so would be relocating here. He's interested in being in Vermont because he wants to be here because he loves mountain biking and wants to be near Kingdom Trails, and he loves skiing and wants to be near Burke. Okay, this is a typical profile for a person we're attracting to Northeast Kingdom. His family is also within the general area, so this job opportunity would bring him much closer to his family. I could tell after a day of him being on campus and spending time with our teams and us interviewing him that he'd be a perfect fit for a career at NVRH. When we wrapped up the day, I asked him if he had any concerns. He said, yeah, I have just one. I looked on Zillow. I don't know if I'll be able to find a place to live. I think relocating here is going to be next to impossible. And I just shook my head because that's the story we keep hearing over and over. I want to put it a little into, give you a sense of that type of job, because a physician's assistant in a busy ER is not an entry-level position. This is a mid-career healthcare professional, and this person could expect to make an annual salary of over $150,000 a year. This is a typical recruit for us, right? And often when we bring in a healthcare professional like this, they have a spouse and partner who may be making similar income as well. So you're looking at people whose annual household incomes could be anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 a year. And these people cannot find homes here. Let's see. Here's a couple more examples. One of our providers has been commuting for about an hour for 6 months before securing housing locally. Another provider who's been with us since October is still looking for local housing, and another since mid-December has been unable to find local housing and travels to NVRH from Norwich. That's an hour away, right, on winter roads. These stories aren't unique and they're not one-offs. We have a staff recruiter in-house. Her name's Heather Spinney. She does a fantastic job of working hard to fill the positions that we do have. She's been tracking this for a while now. And according to her data, over the past year alone, 2022, we have lost at least 10 candidates, all healthcare professionals, who either declined an offer we made to them or accepted the offer and then backed out because they could not find housing that met them or their families' needs here in the Northeast Kingdom. This is exacerbating our workforce challenges. I know that it is really hard at a state level to provide support for middle and upper income workers. And I know there's very much a housing crisis for those at the lowest end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And that is frankly where I've spent most of my career talking about housing issues. But I want to acknowledge there's great work being done with institutions like Rural Edge to address those issues. But really, we need to figure out a solution for this missing middle of the housing market. It's killing us as employers. Over half those healthcare jobs that I shared with you in the Northeast Kingdom half of them at least are nursing jobs. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but right now today, the starting salary for an associate's prepared nurse right out of school at NVRH is $32.45 an hour. That's about $67,000 a year. Okay. Our median nursing wage is $37.12 an hour. That's $77,000 a year. If they have a spouse or partner, they're probably making about the same amount of money. You have two people making $70,000 a year. That's an annual household income of $140,000 a year. Those are pretty darn good incomes. And these are the people that we're trying to attract, and they're the ones struggling to find housing here. To put it in a little perspective, in preparing for this, yesterday, I just said, well, let me just do a quick scan on Zillow, which is what most of our candidates do, right, when they're looking to move to the area. So I kind of zoomed Zillow in on the St. Johnsbury, Linden area and surrounding towns. And I narrowed my search to say, I'm looking for a home between $200,000 and $1 million, right? Once I took out the undeveloped land, and once I took out the ski condo at Burke, there were 6 listings, 6. Of those 6, I would say certainly 2 and probably 3 of them need significant work before they could even be habitable. Folks, this is what my prospective employees are seeing when they consider relocating to the Northeast Kingdom. We're doing what we can here. We're renting unused dorm space from Linden Institute to house travelers. That's worked out really well. For the last 2 years, it's been completely full. We own one small condo and an apartment in downtown St. Johnsbury that we use for staff that we've hired or prospective candidates to as kind of transitional housing, gives them a place to land for a couple of months while they find their permanent housing solution. And that helps. We just worked with the town of St. Johnsbury to rezone the hospital district. We've got about 80 undeveloped acres here. And we rezoned the hospital district to allow for residential housing. This enables me to better work with developers or prospective developers who are interested in doing a project here. Gives us a potential site for a somewhat scalable housing project. And we're continuing to talk to developers in the area to look for ways to support housing projects. I know all of you appreciate just how challenging this issue is. And I look forward to partnering with all of you as we continue to explore solutions. First off, we've got to make the regulatory process easier, cheaper, faster, and more predictable. This is a huge barrier for potential developers here in the Northeast Kingdom, and I keep hearing it over and over again. We need to continue to support municipalities so that they can expand infrastructure into areas that might be appropriate for larger projects, especially around water and wastewater systems. We need to grow technical programs within our technical schools and high schools so that we can grow the workforce that can build these homes, electricians, plumbers, carpenters. And finally, we've got to solve the gap issue. Let's see. I think all of that, we continue to work, will help enable and support private development so that we can address the missing middle needs. I'd encourage all of you as I wrap up here, just, you know, if you have time sometime today, later today, do a little homework. Pretend that I just made you an offer at NVRH and that you and your family are going to be relocating to the Northeast Kingdom. Just do a little search on Zillow. See if you can find a home that meets your budget and meets your family's needs, so that you would consider actually accepting the job here. You know, and then think about it at different income levels. Is your household income $100,000? Is it $200,000? Does that make a difference? Can you find anything? Thank you for taking my testimony today.
Thank you, Sean. And you may know, we heard from the VP of Hospital Operations at UVM Medical, who he himself lived in a rental for 6 months. Actually, he lived in a hotel for 6 months and now is in a rental. So, you know, we're looking statewide and seeing the same thing, but we haven't had as much of a report from the kingdom. It's extremely helpful, and thanks for your testimony. And it sounds like of the many things you're doing, you're spending time talking about housing. So thanks for sharing that with us. Do you still have? Yeah. If you okay. If you need to leave, you know, that's perfectly fine. We're just going to take another 10 minutes on this topic, and you're welcome to stay.
If it would be helpful to you, I'll definitely stay.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to hand it over to Maura to see if she thought anybody else should make additional points, or if she wanted to.
I wanted to run through the highlights of the program.
Yeah, I think that would
be helpful.
Yeah.
So can I talk to you?
I'm going to jump on to other meetings, so I'll let you guys go, but
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate your work. Take care. Bye-bye.
Our capacity chart. I don't know what to put up. It doesn't say.
However, do not have 17 chairs.
We should fix the door. Well, it keeps coming open.
It's been that way. You have to be very
For
clear
years.
about it.
Okay, sometimes it's locking me in, so. What's going on?
Um, So this is on your committee's website. I'm jumping down past all the needs and the data because they've just all told you stories better than my numbers can.
Okay.
What's happening with program we're designing is that, as discussed before, the LIHTC program, tax credit program, goes up to 60% of area median incomes. Sometimes some programs will stretch up to 80% in an affordable housing development. This program is aiming to start right there. We're saying at like 65% AMI and go up from there. We're proposing to go up to 120% of area median income. And so that's why I know the governor called this the missing middle income rental program. And with all due respect to him, I don't consider folks at 65, 80% AMI yet the middle income. And so this is really a rental revolving loan fund that is designed to be a part of something bigger that's being developed. You can imagine some of the projects we've heard about, there may be stretching up into higher income market rate housing, but this could have some more affordable units. There can be a range of households served in this model. But what happens is these developers, as you've heard, will go to a bank and they will say, here's the rents I can charge for this development. Here's how many units, the bedrooms, yada, yada. And the banker will say, you are approved for this much of a loan, and there will be a gap. Those development costs are so high, they cannot get the financing needed. And as I explained to the committee several times ago when testifying, VHFA is just here to fill market gaps the market isn't serving. So what we are proposing is to have a loan program that could pay up to 35% of the total development cost, or we put a unit cap on it. It's $100,000 or $125,000, depending on the income served. We give a little more money for lower income, but that we cap how much of a loan we're going to give to fill that gap. And that's the red number. The 1.3 million is in this fictitious project, the funding gap. I was at a roundtable that Representative Sims organized a few months ago of developers and builders in the Northeast Kingdom. There was a lot of talk about the kinds of things that the Hales were speaking about small projects. This is designed to be workable if you have 6, 8, 10, 12 units. It also could be a piece of something bigger, but we're trying to have something that doesn't come with the behemouthness of the federal programs and all that, but yet still protects the state's investment. So what we would do is employers right now are forced to go it alone. You will hear more and more. Each of your districts actually, I think, has an example of employers who are building housing for their own workers.
Some other employers, I give them credit, they are building housing in the community because knowing that their workers will be a part of that community housing. We're trying to encourage more of that latter model because we know that employers, not all of them are big enough to build housing for their own workers. Sometimes that's a complicated relationship as an employer to house your worker and employ them. And so what we're doing is we've said, if a employer or a municipality want to chip in 5% of the cost of building this housing, then we will give even better loan rates to that housing development. So we're trying to leverage this. We're trying to give those employers an opportunity. You know, if I'm an employer, I have a couple $100,000 I can contribute to housing. That's not going to get me far. That doesn't build a development. But if that could be paired with what a developer was already doing, that could leverage, and maybe now VHFA's loan terms go down to interest only, or the interest rate goes down lower. We also are targeting underserved communities, looking at maximizing those LIHTC credits. That they're called 4% credits, it's a jargon term, or units that provide deeper affordability can trigger these preferential terms. They'd be loans, they could convert from a construction loan. Peter talked about, you know, those construction carrying costs being very high. They can convert to a permanent loan, so the term could go up to 30 years. Our interest rates would be below the market, down as low as 0%. I mean, 0% money coming to us, so we can pass that along, and go from there. I think that Peter did a great job focusing on the revolving nature of this. This I already spoke to about the 35% and how much we would give as a cap per unit. This could cover new construction, it could cover rehabilitation. It also can cover NOAHs, which are naturally occurring affordable housing. This is, I'm gonna say, sometimes crummy rental housing that is very affordable, but the quality, it may be 40 years old, in need of a real refresh, but at risk of being converted to market rate or higher. And so we've worked with the nonprofits about what they need in order to buy up some of these struggling rental properties, struggling in a quality sense, so that by the preferential loan terms, they would be able to invest in rehabilitating these. There would be strong compliance for this program. Here's something that some of you may care about, especially maybe Senator Brock, about the affordability we require would be for the length of a loan, meaning for as long as you're getting some government benefit, public subsidy equivalent, these properties would have to be affordable. But if that loan term was 10 years, it would only be for 10 years. If you paid off that loan early, it would be at least 7 years of affordability. But whenever you pay off that loan, the affordability would last for another 3 years. So it's not a benefit cliff here where someone's rent is about to go up in June. We would cap rent increases at 3% annually for the term of the loan and for the 3 years after. These are the kind of terms we put in front of developers and builders, and they're saying, yeah, I'd live with that. Like, if I could get this, they're telling us that this is acceptable. VHFA would do the income certification at move-in and at each turnover. When a unit turns over, we would not be checking annually though. So that's, if someone's income went up a little bit, we're not gonna kick them out. That's actually, even the tax credit program doesn't do that. And so there's a real role for employers with this program and this partnership of the program. So we have 5 minutes left, and I don't know if there's questions for any of us who've spoken. I would be happy. This presentation is on your site, and we could get into some more of those details if you have those questions.
Good. We will open it up for questions, of course.
Yeah, it makes sense if you're allowing the rents to go up 3%, that you'll have people's incomes to go up too. So that makes sense. I think this is brilliant, actually. I think it's great, and it complements the work you've already done on developing the missing middle home building.
That's the design. And so
Yeah,
right now
it's
your
just-
bill has a mention of saying that the state should appropriate something in this regard. Again, there's $20 million in the governor's budget for it. It also, I will say, is in the rural caucus's housing bill as well.
Right.
That was my question. I mean, we're going to look at a universe of funding for housing. that we hope is bigger than years past, but, you know, has a limit. And there's a backlog for the homeownership piece and missing middle. There's other priorities. If we're choosing among priorities, you know, I think my inclination is ownership over rental, just in terms of, you know, large sums of money to either one. What case would you make that, I mean, I'm sure you want all of them to be funded exactly, but, and you know, the governor
Should
has
we
no
call
money
up
for
Mr.
the.
Tester again to explain the need? I mean, it really, I agree with you, and I think
Yeah.
that at certain income levels, we do have an assumption that people are gonna make that leap into homeownership.
Mhm.
I heard when Gary Scott was testifying a week or so ago in this committee from UVM Medical Center, that the VP you're speaking of, that he said, you know, he was living in the motel for 6 months, 8 months, and then now found a place, thankfully. And then I
He's
heard a
renting.
gasp of, he's renting.
I
We
know,
assume that senior VPs at medical centers, you know, are going to be able to finally find something to own. And so I do think that we need homeownership. And so I would absolutely support, the Rural Caucus Bill has $10 million for the homeownership program. And I really think that that needs to be done also. But this investment will revolve. This will last longer. This is a legacy program that will continue to live on beyond. And I do think that the market is in desperate need of this as well. We do need both.
And until higher.
And the VP's family was still in, I believe it was Oklahoma.
Texas, yeah, they
Texas.
were, they're
I
still
mean,
in Texas.
If you're, and he found through somebody who knew somebody, a rental. But if you're a hospital VP and you've got a couple of teenage kids, they're not gonna wanna live in a 2-bedroom apartment.
And this is very efficient. This is $100,000 per unit. And that's about what we're spending on the homeownership side. It goes up to, I'm sorry, like about 150,000 per unit. This is 120,000 per unit. And so there's, this is a very efficient use of funding, but it doesn't reach that super low income either. That's why it can be so efficient.
Senator Ferguson.
So we've also heard that the youngest generation isn't buying and they're wanting to rent. So there's a whole market of people and to go to Peter's housing situation, there are people who are just gonna wait this out and gonna ride it and rent until houses are affordable again, if they ever are.
That was my advice to my nephew.
Yeah, I mean, you know, why wade into this right now? I mean, it's foolish to.
The housing market has traditionally gone up. It's never gone up like this, but
In
it
the
hasn't come
times-
crashing down either.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it'll probably adjust.
We have
But not
time
wild.
for one more question. Senator Brock.
If I heard correctly, Peter indicated that the housing that he builds is substantially less costly than the same housing that's built by many of the subsidized projects. And I'm wondering why.
I don't know why. I suspect it's the sort of complications of achieving the subsidies. I have not been through that process, but I think there's a lot of things that go into that. As we're much closer to that where the rubber meets the road as well.
But there's no substantive difference in terms of what you build and what they build.
I say that's accurate, yes. Yeah, we don't have sort of there's a lot of legal, there's a lot of, there's consultants, there's just a lot more to, especially these tax credit programs.
But
The only thing I
But
know about
don't
it is
you-
they're very
you
expensive
mentioned-
to get through that process.
You mentioned in some cases double, if I heard you
No,
correctly.
that was
I wouldn't say double, but I'd say, you know, we're just looking at, and again, I'm looking at sort of an average price per unit, published average price per unit, and comparing to what we would produce at. And I mean, we're essentially building a single family house construction for the whole house, 2,300 square feet. That's basically our cost. When I look at per unit cost for these multifamily buildings, that's what we're spending to build a house. So, you know, that's where I'm set-wise. I don't know where that lands, but I think we're just building per
housing unit a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, I thought, that's what I heard, was more efficiently.
If I could just,
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, we do have to move on. We have guests who come from out of town to be here and I don't want to shortchange them. So this has been really helpful, but it's a little crowded in here and we do have to move on. Thank you so much. Thanks for what you're doing and thanks for being here today.
Thank you, John and Zach.
And
And if they want to send us information, they.
yeah, you can always
You
email,
can email.
The same Scott who helped you schedule. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, if anybody has testimony they want to submit, please.
Yeah. So I
Please do.
think there's just been a little bit of confusion. It's not part of our protocol to have people who are not on the witness list on Zoom because people can watch on YouTube. So I probably would allow it for other city councilors, but if you are not a city councilor, I'm just gonna have to ask you to, the Zoom link isn't supposed to necessarily be transferable and it sounds like it got sent to others. So we'll just have to ask people to leave our Zoom room and go on our YouTube link. Thank you. Madam Chair.
Please, thanks.
I don't know, it's gonna be a little tight to get to the witness. And is this Paul? Okay, so you can join up at the witness seat. There might be an extra seat up there that you can, there's some sheets there.
And I apologize, I sent the Zoom link.
That's okay, I just don't want to break
Realize the
protocol.
protocol.
Yeah, and
We didn't have Zoom when I.
right, yeah.
Somebody did that once and they got hacked. A very nasty thing.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I just want to, I just want to know if there were other city councilors that joined on Zoom, I'd probably allow it because that's the body whose letter we
I
received.
actually didn't share it with them. These are two people who asked. so
Okay,
so I
okay.
sent it to.
But we do have another city councilor in the room now.
Yes,
Okay,
we
so I
do.
just want to note that as we begin and I'll let you, and I believe we have copies of the letter on our witness.
It's on
the
under
website.
Helen's name.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you. So good morning and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about, I guess what I'll call the omnibus housing bill and the
Working
House
title.
Companion Bill, H68. My name is Helen Reilly and I serve as the chair of the South Burlington City Council. And it's in that capacity that I come before you to share my city's and the council's thoughts regarding a few aspects of this bill. With me is the Director of Planning, Paul Connor, and he'll speak later. The letter we submitted was the result of a thoughtful review of the housing bills by our 7-member Planning Commission. The City Council adopted it on Monday as an accurate reflection of the work and interests of South Burlington. And it's intended to be helpful and provide some concrete suggestions or solutions to those areas that could jeopardize the city's future work. And let me begin by saying that the city strongly supports the goals and many of the provisions. We are deeply appreciative of your efforts to address the critical shortage of affordable housing in Vermont. We feel that our experiences at the local level may provide some important information to your deliberations. I would be the first to admit that South Burlington is not a typical Vermont town. We're the second largest with a population of 20,000 and growing. We're situated in a relatively vibrant economic sector. We have a well-staffed planning department. We have infrastructure for water and sewer throughout much of the city. We have committed residents to participate in shaping their community through committee membership and outreach events, and we have generous voters who are willing to invest in housing and parks and conservation. So we're possibly the only community with growth in our school population. So we are blessed in many, many ways. And we've worked hard to make our community a better place for all and welcoming to others. In the 11 years that I've been as a counselor, South Burlington has been actively working in the housing shortage and searching for that right balance between natural areas and developed areas within the context of housing needs and climate change. Some of the things we've achieved since I've been there. We've created an open space fund with 1 cent on the property tax to provide resources for the city to purchase open spaces for parks, recreation, and conservation. We established an affordable housing trust fund with an annual general fund appropriation. It's small, but we did not cut it through COVID. That was one of the things that we said, now's not the time to cut there. We've utilized the state support through the TIF program to create a new downtown city center, and in that center adopted form-based code that enables housing density with multiple stories. We imposed interim zoning for 3 years to do several things: help identify critical natural resources and open spaces, restructure a TDR, transferable development rights program, in the southeast quadrant where most of the open land is, direct the planning commission to develop various clustered PUDs or plan unit development designs that increase housing density and types, and strengthen protection for habitat blocks, stream corridors, and natural areas. We adopted resulting LDRs that provide a carefully balanced approach to density, environmentally sound principles, and smart growth for future development. We adopted inclusionary zoning with incentives for additional units throughout the city. We partnered with Cathedral Square and the Champlain Housing Trust to build elder and affordable housing in our new city center with housing fund dollars. We invested $1 million of the city ARPA funds to help Summit Properties build in our transit overlay district, 180 unit affordable unit building, including 20 units for the homeless. The infrastructure and city center that we built with the federal earmark and TIF funds literally paved the way for UVM and the University of Medical Center to begin 2 more large developments to meet workforce housing, including a childcare center. Certainly the kind of housing that I think the CEO from Northeastern was talking about. And we developed and adopted a climate action plan that supports development in the right areas. These actions and investments have generated 1,000 permanently affordable homes, 180 more are approved, and additional housing is in permitting, the preliminary permitting. 2,500 acres or 24% of South Burlington are zoned to allow 4 or 5 plus units per acre, with the majority being over 7 units per acre. Other areas are required to achieve compact development through high density on portions of a parcel and conservation on the remainder. And a way to take a parcel of land that has a good area for development and perhaps some sensitive environmental areas, so you can have both sort of clustered and then conserve some. In addition, many market rate homes have also been built. So we are attending to that group, not the middle. The missing middle is difficult. That's really our airport area. And of course, with the F-35s or the F-16s rather, we lost 200 of those affordable middle income housing.
Did the town buy them?
No,
There was
the
a whole-
FAA owns them.
The FAA, right, okay, right. I knew somebody had bought a massive number of them.
But we're not done yet. Municipalities have served the state as incubators of many state policies. It's really, in my mind, where the rubber meets the road, not for every program, but for a lot of them. We know our communities intimately, and in my opinion, can best advance our common goals, our housing goals of more and appropriate housing as South Burlington is doing. Housing is clearly one of the pressing issues for our community, for the state, and for the country. And South Burlington has taken this issue very, very seriously. We are interested in being your partner and working with the legislature to further our collective progress. So I'm going to now turn it over to the Director of Planning for the City of South Burlington, Paul Connor. I think he can best describe several issues within the language of the bill that would potentially make it very difficult for South Burlington to continue to address the housing needs in the smart growth pathway that we're planning.
Thank you.
Thank
So we'll
you.
leave questions to the end.
Yes, if you don't mind. 'cause I
And
think-
Paul, you might have been on the road when I asked this. I should have asked a couple days ago, but I did wonder if you could also bring the amount of money that you're aware of that the state and federal government have invested in municipal water and sewer in South Burlington. Is that a number you can find for us this week?
This week, yes,
Okay,
off the
thank
top of
you.
my head, probably.
Yeah, no, I probably got to you in transit. I'm the community asked you all that.
Maybe 2 words sum it up, a lot.
Do you think it's a lot? Would you, if you had to back of a napkin?
The city has both committed from its own ratepayers
Mhm.
and supplemented by state and federal grants, substantial investment in our wastewater and our water infrastructure. I think the last really big one was in 2012 with the Airport Parkway wastewater treatment facility. That was a $25 million upgrade. The bulk of that was ratepayers, but certainly the state and federal contributions were substantial in making that affordable for the ratepayers. This March, next month, the voters are considering a $30 million bond for upgrade of our other wastewater treatment facility. We're also working with our partners at the Champlain Water District on installing a second water tower that serves what we call our high service area, the bulk of our community, and we are partnering and looking for state and federal grant support, but understanding the bulk will be on the ratepayers.
Yeah, airport should definitely been federal and state.
Well, we call it Airport Parkway. It just happens to be that's the name of the street, but
The airport is benefiting.
certainly it is.
When you say the bulk, do you have a figure there or you want to wait to get us that?
The water storage, that water area serves about 2/3 to 3/4 of the geography of the city, basically everything except the Sheldon Road corridor. That's sort of our divider for both the wastewater and water supply based on geography essentially. So
And when you say the bulk will be ratepayers, did you have a figure?
I'd be happy to provide that information. I don't want to speak out of turn on something that I don't have the numbers in front of me. Well, thank you, Chair. Really, I think that was a very thorough presentation. You hit a lot of my high points, so thank you.
Well, you're gonna get the detail though.
Correct.
We do like details.
Yeah, absolutely.
She teed you up, but she didn't do the app.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So just a couple of quick numbers for you.
Very good. We like
South
numbers.
Burlington has about 900 dwelling units that have been approved through the development review process, either through a DRB or administrative review, that have not yet pulled a permit for construction. So we are anticipating a lot coming in the future. We have about 400 additional that are just starting their development review process with us. So we're very excited that even though we can say that there's been a lot of success on meeting housing needs, there's a lot of room to go, and we are actively in that area.
Another question I might ask you to answer this week, if you don't have it now, is we've been hearing a lot about TDRs. They exist around the country. How many housing units have those resulted in being created?
I'll get to that in a
Okay.
moment if that's okay with you. So in the last 10 years, some areas that we have done improvements in our local regulations to specifically address housing. As Chair really indicated, we adopted a form-based code in our city center area. Prior to that, though it's been our vision to establish a downtown, we have not seen any new housing in that the area that became our form-based code, Williston Road, U Mall area, in the 15 years prior to adopting the regulation. Since that time, we have approved and have under construction about 550 homes. Another 170 were approved yesterday in partnership with the University of Vermont, and we have another about 200 that are in the hopper to be reviewed this year. So we're really excited that has been a major tool. And what we did was we eliminated maximum density altogether. So there is no maximum
So, sorry, that's in your downtown.
in our
develop-
downtown. Yeah, so there is no maximum density whatsoever. There's no.
They'll still hit Act 250.
Yes, unless they qualify as a,
PHP.
correct, priority housing project, and I'll speak to that in the tools in this moment. We eliminated lot sizes entirely, we eliminated parking entirely, so all of the things that this bill identifies, or several of them, as being rightfully obstacles to housing, we've taken out in our city center area. And the result has been big success.
Yeah, I think we have clarifying questions as we go.
Are they
Sure.
multi-unit?
The bulk of them are multi-unit. Most of them are larger buildings, but we've seen Habitat for Humanity replace a single-family home with a fourplex. We've seen some townhomes. We've seen a dentist office that tore down what used to be an old single-family home and was running as a dentist office, dermatologist, and replaced it with a two-story building that has 6 apartments over the dermatologist. So it's sort of, creating the mixed use. Yeah, and then some larger ones in partnership with Cathedral Square, Champagne Housing Trust, Summit, where they have scale, they're doing it more at scale at 40 or 50 homes in a building.
Are there any duplexes or single families?
Not in our form-based code area. The land value is such that, frankly, it's not economically really viable for them to do it. There are a series of townhomes that are triplexes, so 3 and then a space and then 3, and the middle ones in some cases are permanently affordable because they're just a little bit easier to hit that price point. So we're seeing a mix, but not in that area, single and two family.
Okay, thank you.
As Chair Reilly said, we have adopted an inclusionary standard that requires that a minimum proportion of the of new development over 12 homes be permanently affordable. In the state law that already exists, municipalities have to provide incentives and offsets. And one of the points that I wanted to make regarding the bill specifically is there's a laudable goal of providing an incentive for affordable housing. The bill suggests or indicates an additional story or additional lot coverage. What we have found in South Burlington is that the need to provide incentives is very important, but the character of those incentives might need some fine tuning at the local level. So in our case, in the last conversation that you just had on testimony, part of the discussion was what about larger, more bedrooms in an affordable unit. So one of our incentives is that if a developer provides a 3-bedroom or a 4 or more bedroom, include a permanently affordable home, they get more credit for having done that. So it counts as 2 or 3 affordable dwelling units. We have found that that's been really successful, and we just approved a project a couple months ago that does 8, 3, and then has a space that can be convertible to be 4-bedroom homes in it in the middle of an otherwise mostly single to 3-family home neighborhood.
That's
We're really
great
excited
feedback
about
if you
that.
could share that language
Yeah.
when you mentioned something.
So we're really excited about that was meeting a local need
Yeah.
and is consistent, I think, with the intent of what you're speaking of.
Absolutely.
But an additional story by itself may not have met what their goal was because they're already tall. They really needed more credit in a different way.
Bigger
Yeah.
apartments.
Right,
Can you
and
tell
credit
me-
for having done so, because
Right.
otherwise it's really hard to hit affordability. So
Did-
we'll
did
absolutely
you-
follow up.
Did you give final approval to an impact fee for projects, and is that of a certain size, and what is that amount?
The city has impact fees on a few different subject areas, so recreation, transportation, police facilities, and most recently, just last month, a education impact fee in recognition, as Chair really indicated, we're one of the handful of communities that are seeing increase in our school population. So that has been applied.
Surprising numbers of us.
Well, that's
Woodstock
good.
is too. So, I mean, I think COVID had a big impact on our.
So our council did just last month adopt an impact fee to help offset the cost of that new construction. It exempts permanently affordable housing. So that was one key that both the school board and the council, so that cost will be borne by the general taxpayer, essentially as an acknowledgement that affordable housing is a really big component And I'm sure that Chair Willie could speak to the politics of it. It's difficult at any time to adopt an impact fee. It adds cost to development. At the same time, the cost of schools is a really, it's a big number. And how does that get paid for? And how do we balance the need between the general taxpayer and new development?
What is the amount?
Yeah.
The amount ranges, it depends on the number of bedrooms. So for a 0 and 1 bedroom, it's about $2,500.
For what size?
A 0 and 1 bedroom dwelling unit. For a 2 bedroom, it's a little bit shy of $5,000. For a 3 bedroom, it's about $7,500, and for a 4 or more bedroom, it's a little bit, it's around $11,000.
That's just the school impact.
This is just the school impact fee, and it's for the capacity increase at 2 of the elementary schools for the medium term of the next 8 to 15 years.
Well, Senator Brock.
Are there other impact fees?
There are. There's a police facility impact fee. The city built a new police station about 10 years ago, and so that gets charged, and per home it's about $400 plus minus. There's a recreation impact fee to purchase and develop land for recreation purposes, and that depends on whether it's a multifamily or a single family, but it's in the neighborhood of $1,000 to $1,600. And then there's a transportation impact fee that gets charged for improvements, intersections, identified roadway projects, that kind of thing.
That's the transportation one seems to have the strongest nexus to impact of development. You looked into the ad valorem question about the rest of them.
Yep. Well, they all have a connection. So, for example, the police department was specifically sized to meet our needs of the city that we anticipate being in about 2045. So it was oversized specifically so that it can grow with the community, for example. And then the recreation is, that's been, I think, our longest standing one, especially as we move to being a multifamily community. This year, South Burlington crossed over to being the majority of homes in South Burlington are not single family any longer. That's a massive, massive shift that our community has seen as we move to a point where the bulk of our population lives in multifamily housing. The need for outdoor recreation spaces for them, active use recreation spaces, just grows. We just this year constructed a brand new dog park, and it is just packed with people who are thrilled to be there. And the number one question is, where's the next one going to be? Because that's one of the side effects of the smart growth principles that the city has adopted is many people don't have their own backyard, and that's okay, but it creates other needs.
But it tops out at 4 bedroom or more at potentially $15,000 for all of those.
Well, the transportation one we didn't hear.
Transportation is about $600 to $1,000. So it's all in. That's about a right number, about $15-ish thousand in impact and other types of fees like that for a 4 bedroom unit, as long as it's not. If it's affordable housing, the school impact fee is not charged.
Just the school impact fee. And so if a project is 20% affordable housing, the 20%.
Correct. So each unit that is affordable doesn't pay it. So it's a per unit fee. So if you're building a 50 unit apartment building and 10 of them are affordable, then those 10 don't pay that fee.
And one last one. How long have the impact fees been in place? Because actually, I think it's a smart idea because every new housing unit has.
Sure. So it's at least 1994. It might be before that. The school one
The ability to levy them.
existed and then was removed in 2008 and then was brought back this year. So that's not been there the entire time. The police one's been there about 8 or 10 years, but the transportation one was the first one. Other tools that the city has done that I think connect closely into the legislation. 4 or 5 years ago along Shelburne Road, we adjusted our zoning to allow for 5-story buildings as of right. So rather than what most communities and we historically have done is saying 35 feet, And if you ask the board, you might get a waiver to make it more clear to everybody. It just said 5 stories as of right, which I think again connects to the affordable piece, but rather than having to demonstrate affordability, we just said simplify the rules. We've substantially removed our minimum parking standards. Citywide, there's only 1 remaining.
What's the remaining?
So the proposal was to eliminate minimums across the board, period. We sought feedback on the question of should there still be a minimum at all for multifamily housing? And interestingly, it was members of the development community who said that they would recommend that we keep some level of minimum on the multifamily. That they were, for the most part, seasoned developers who said that had they had no minimum at the start of their career, they might have undercounted. That said, I think that we're at about 1.5 today. This is not part of the testimony of the city council, but I think that it may be worthy of revisiting that and lowering that number again. And so the legislation as proposed, I can't speak for the city in that front, but professionally for us, frankly, the private sector is identifying what they need. They're not generally underserving parking if they don't. It is in our experience. We have adopted most recently an expansion of our transfer development rights program. So Senator Romney spoke about this question earlier. It essentially TDRs, I'll try not to get too wonky. It allows for development density to be shifted from a priority area that one would like to not see development to an area where a committee would like to see development.
And the parcel owner gets compensated fairly.
Correct.
And that I think is critical to us from what we've been hearing.
Correct. Yeah. So it's a market driven in our community. We don't set a price. It is what somebody will sell their development right if they find that it is of value to them financially, and if they don't, then they won't. So that's their choice entirely. In South Burlington, we use it to identify land that should not be built on. Nationally, it can be used for all sorts of things.
But I guess my question is, it can't be devalued first. The city hasn't zoned it and said, we want this to stay open space. Now sell it to us and transfer it. So how much are they valued? What is fair market value?
Right. So back in 2006, the city adopted this program and it paired the southeastern part of the city was zoned generally at a little over 1 dwelling unit per acre. The city identified at that time and in prior work that seeing 1 house per acre is not resolving either issue. It's neither smart, affordable housing, nor is it land conservation. And so that system reorganized how we do development. About half the land was set aside as being conservation districts, habitat, travel areas, active farmland, wetlands, that kind of thing.
When you say it was set aside, people
it
own
was
that.
put into a zoning district that's essentially a conservation district.
And then they were told you could sell it.
Right. So many communities establish conservation zones and say this is our rural area and we only allow X amount of development. In South Burlington, the same was done, but then landowners were compensated through a TDR program. Essentially, they're given the ability to say you can still use it for agriculture, you can still use it for a home. In addition to that, in recognition that that land is of substantial value in central Chittenden County, if you choose, you can sell still that 1 unit an acre to be built somewhere else. So instead of it being built on your land, it gets sold to be used somewhere else. It was just expanded this year to add new places where it can be sold to, primarily the Shelburne Road corridor, where we have now eliminated maximum density altogether. The goal with that is to continue to encourage housing to be where we have transit service, where we have water, sewer, electricity, all of the infrastructure, and B, to increase the market.
Are the taxpayers paying for this transfer, right?
Nope, that's entirely a private. If somebody chooses to sell their rights, then they do that.
Who compensates?
The buyer. So
So the developer who is buying those rights elsewhere compensates.
correct. So I otherwise, as a developer, could have built 20 homes on this property. I'll just pick a random number. With the purchase of development TDRs, I now get to build 30. I have paid the landowner for the right to essentially use their 10 homes. So by expanding the program this year, we believe that we have expanded the market so that more people, there's more buyers, therefore more people, the price and the opportunity for those who want to sell will increase.
So yesterday, of course, we heard from your conservation commission.
Self-Burlington Land Trust.
The land trust.
The land trust, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Conservation.
Just to be clear.
Right, so, a lot of their conserved properties they're proposing are privately owned.
Yeah.
And not legally protected, she said, because I said, if they're legally protected and already conserved, then you can't develop on them. What percent of those that the conservation, that the land trust is looking to further say no building on this, have gone through the TDR process?
So there are, in rough numbers, there's about 1,700 acres of land that is in the, what we call ascending area, the area that is intended for conservation.
It isn't protected.
Well, that's in that zone.
Yeah.
Protected has different layers to it. So all of it is already zoned as a low density or
Right, that
conservation
doesn't
area.
necessarily protect it.
It has a legal protection of zoning, but zoning could change. What the TDR program does is puts a easement that is more permanent on it.
Right, and would,
Of those 1,700 acres, that represents about 2,200 homes total in theory. Of that, about 1,500 have been used/built. So there's about 800 to 1,000 homes of which somebody who owns land could sell their TDRs for today.
okay.
That's about the rough
Right.
number of how much that could be.
Senator Harrison.
That's very helpful because there was one amount established at that time in 2006.
Yeah,
And so that's the bank, not the,
it's modified a little bit over the years, but that's approximately it.
Okay.
It expanded a little bit. 2 years ago, it contracted a little bit a few years ago as zoning modifies a little bit here and there, but yes,
All right.
generally speaking.
and that's certified in some way by the city as available, like,
Right, it's built into our zoning.
okay.
It's the only time that a TDR, a transferable development right, is legally in effect is at the time that a developer goes to use a TDR somewhere else. Then per the state law, it gets recorded in the land records as having been essentially, the home was moved from here, the theoretical home was moved from here to where it was built. And therefore, what's called a density reduction easement gets placed on the land where it was sold, but that's only at the time that the other one goes to be built.
Okay, which makes sense.
Yeah, but it's a density reduction, so it doesn't put the land into full conservation. It just means it becomes a permanently low density area.
In our regulations, that piece of land, and so each home represents a little bit less than an acre, has to be, per the state law, it has to be shown on a plat, and the development potential is removed from that piece.
So if it's a farm plot with one farmhouse on it, there can be no additional houses built on it.
Correct.
Well, it depends if they sold all their TDRs or some of them.
But it
So let's
could-
say you had 10 acres.
Yeah.
You had a house, and then let's say you sold one TDR for whatever reason,
So one TDR is 1 acre.
roughly, sure.
Okay.
So you'd still have 8.5 acres of land that is still subject to our zoning, but is not permanently protected.
And your zoning says 1 house per acre.
Our zoning says 1 house per essentially 15 acres.
Yeah.
This is what a TDR program does, is it keeps the theoretical density allowance, but then reduces what is physically allowed on that property. So we created a conservation district and then said, and as compensation, you could sell theoretical development rights.
Yikes. That's,
You have zoning, that's one house per 15 acres.
that's hard
In
to
the
believe.
conservation district, yeah.
How does that get called conservation? I guess because there's still,
Well,
there's
because,
still,
because it is a
housing.
recognition of history, that there are farmhouses that exist there. If we were to say that there is no development allowed, then A, that's saying this to a landowner, you can't even build a house on your property. And B, anything that was pre-existing, of which most of these have one house, all of a sudden we're making them a pre-existing non-conformity.
I'm
which is-
in the other direction, sort of. You have one house per 15 acre zoning. So when they go to sell their rights, they're limited to the value of selling it as a parcel. That's one house on 15 acres.
For the purpose of selling their rights, it's one house per acre,
For the purpose of selling rights, it's one house per acre.
correct? So they can sell development rights at one house per acre. They can physically build on the property
If they chose to keep it.
if they,
No, not anymore, not if it's in this in zoned conservation district.
they can do any combination of those two things.
Yeah.
So let me give an example that is about conservation. The history of this is it started actually in New York City, where there was historic preservation of Grand Central Station.
Right.
Their TDR programs are used to protect air rights. So essentially, a building like Grand Central Station, all the buildings around it get to build, say, 50 stories in height. But as a matter of protecting Grand Central Station, they wanted to say you can't build more than the height of that building. However, you can sell your other 35 stories to somebody else. So that's essentially what this happens.
Which is why we have the Pan Am building, or no longer the Pan.
What I guess what I'm driving at, I don't want to be opaque, is
Sure.
if we said you have to along municipal and sewer lines, sewer and water lines, make it 5 units per acre, that would simply increase the value of selling those TDRs elsewhere. But you wouldn't be forced to use that. Or you want that kind of exemption so that you can use TDRs where you would otherwise have to build 5 homes per
Right.
acre.
I think that it would be a question that we want to speak with either legislative council or own council to know whether a
Okay.
TDR program
Okay.
meets the intents and purposes of what the legislation says,
That's a
or
good
whether that's
question.
counter.
And you're the only ones doing it,
Right.
so I'm just trying to.
So, right, so I think that that's a
program.
good question of
Yeah.
if that density could be moved somewhere else,
Mhm.
is that still meeting the intent of the rule? Is it still meeting the
Right.
letter of the rule?
That we would supersede your one house per acre, but you
Correct.
could still use your program to take a 5 house per acre.
Yeah.
Development right and move it somewhere else.
Right, so I think that's a good open question for us.
That's what we're trying to
And I think it speaks to the major point that we just wanted to share, which
Sure.
is that there's a lot of really good material in this bill. The term of 5 dwelling units, areas, districts served by 5 dwelling units an acre is too blunt of a tool. It doesn't define the word district. So does it mean an entire zoning district? Does it mean a water district? Does it mean an area of a certain distance? Does it mean, generally speaking, but excluding either state and federal or locally identified natural resources or historic areas? And I think if, for the most part, what Chair Reilly's testimony and mine is intended to say is that we both agree with and have espoused the overwhelming majority of the intent of this rule, and it's on the margins
Mhm.
that the areas where the city has tried to complement its very high density areas with some level of intended conservation of natural resources and habitat areas is putting that at risk of the ability to accomplish both.
So
It's
I'll
too
just-
blunt.
And I think I went over, Commissioner, I hope you're okay going at 11. We have 2 times on our
I think I'm not.
agenda. Oh, great, okay.
Want to get the sense of.
So we'll take a 15-minute break in a little bit, but we are certainly looking at that section and figuring out on the margins what makes sense. We don't want to make a rule that just works for South Burlington. We want to make a rule that works for the entire state, but we're very open to the input of all our communities on that specific piece. So that work is, because we have to deal with a much larger bill here.
Of course.
That's why I mentioned to the chair of your council, between you and your city manager and others, we have a conversation led by Senator Harrison and Catherine Dimitrick from the planners to sort of land somewhere different on that language. I just want to say that out loud. Recognizing, as you heard, we have a statewide problem and we can't carve out a big piece of this, but I don't think we'd intend to harm your TDRs if they're working and people are getting compensated fairly for what they're giving up.
And that's the question, is are they working? It sounds like
There's been some lawsuits, as I understand.
There was one challenge to it that was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that South Burlington's rules and essentially the state enabling laws are correct. So that is settled at this point.
Is there like a summary you can share with us? Because
that would be
curious.
Sure. It was challenging whether the program is a valid function of municipalities, and it was deemed by the Vermont Supreme Court to be.
Okay, so not a question of whether someone is compensated.
No.
And what year was that?
The decision was rendered in 2019, I believe, although the last 3 years have been sort of a blur for all of us, so I might be plus or minus a year on that.
No, remediation is a standard thing, in zoning. You infringe on this protected area and you get the ability to protect another area somewhere else. What I'm hearing is we are trying to deal with communities that have exclusionary zoning. You can only have 3 acres or 10 acres. In doing that, I wouldn't want to mess up a community that is doing essentially what we want them to do.
On average around their.
But they're also preserving some open land, because that quality of life, that desirability is in that balance between how well over time these, dense units remain desirable or deteriorate as people looking for more desirable situations move out. And this is new, and I just hesitate to mess.
Well, as you've said, we want everyone to enjoy a little bit of open space. So we still have to make sure the program isn't pushing everyone onto the Pizza Hut lot, that I hope gets developed one day. And, keeping one house per 10 acre for those who can afford it. That, you're a planner. So just want to know, we want to make sure people aren't packed into one tiny core. Right. And you have all this open space that is purchased only by.
Chair really spoke about our revamping of our planning and development program. Yeah. One of the concerns raised in our community was one of the tools we have is called conservation PV, protect a certain proportion of the property and then build on the remainder. One of the concerns was exactly along those lines of what happens if a bulk of the property is conserved and then the remainder just winds up with 4 big homes. Is that achieving the city's goals? And so the tool that was adopted last year pairs the minimum conservation with a minimum density of 4 units in acreage to be designed on the building area. So it's a combination of, you can't just put a handful of estate lots together with conserving the bulk of the property. It's conserving the bulk of the property and designing to at least 4 homes per acre in the portion that's designated for development. So I think that speaks to a tool like that, and a tool in the legislation that would acknowledge this pairing of issues of access to open space, or whether it's private or public, and compact development where development is identified. It is, I think, what the city's been trying to achieve and what the state legislation and the compact villages surrounded by open countryside planning will espouses.
If you also advocate for our Act 250 changes in our bill, that is more of what this committee is trying to accomplish.
But happily come back and talk more about that if you'd like.
Frederick Law Olmsted got this. What would New York be for that?
Well, this has been, I think, extremely helpful. We've learned a lot, and there's pieces that have answered other questions for us about 3-bedroom properties, et cetera, you know.
Thank you for your time. I'll just put in one quick plug to
Mhm.
say that we have really benefited from the state designation programs.
Yes.
The neighborhood development area, the Newtown Center. We would love the ability to have, to expand that. So.
And, you know, we're working now to consolidate them so
Right.
that they sort of grew up like.
So whether it's an additional designation for places like Shelburne Road, Barry Montpelier Road, outside Newport, places that have sort of historically been built and are ripe for redevelopment, or as a simpler piece, the potential for a community to have a second designated Newtown Center or downtown, if we can meet all the standards. We're limited to one today, so we had to pick either the Williston Road side or the Shelburne Road side.
Right.
Additional tools to help us connect those dots, bring it to a neighborhood development area, get the priority housing projects would be a really big benefit in our community, and in our view, completely complement this work.
Yeah,
Right.
And I just, you know, I'll just speak my final piece, which is I think where we might have to compromise or just recognize differences or hopefully find common ground is that, you know, 1 house per acre is not better for the environment than 5 houses per acre. You know, that pushes more people outside of the county, further away from the largest employers. So, you know, we are trying in this bill to tackle extreme low density in areas that we have, you know, a major transportation issue to think
And I
about
think
as
that's
well.
completely consistent with 1 house per acre is not a sustainable model in South Burlington.
Right, right.
Maybe not.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
I'll let-
so much for your
yeah,
time.
Just one little question,
Yeah.
a question not to be answered now, but if you have suggestions or experiences with ADUs that you'd like to share, that would be helpful, because we've been talking a lot about ADUs and definitions and relevance.
Absolutely.
Have you had lots of ADU development in?
Not as much as we would think that we would have. We have adopted and slightly broader than the state legislation, but we haven't seen a ton of them yet. I think
may
that
see
the tool that we need to deploy is how does an individual homeowner, how do we help them get there? Because
So
it's still-
navigators would help?
Navigators, there are still some barrier costs to it. You know, they have to pay for wastewater. There's in the legislation, it talks about public buildings or not in terms of the inspection programs associated with it. Just little barriers because it's not typically developers doing this work. It's
Right,
an
that's
individual
the-
homeowner. And so
major-
navigators, we have it on our to-do list to say, how do we just take the rules we've already got and say, here's the simple guide to getting these done. And at the local level, we're also pairing this with the discussion that the council is invited to begin about regulating short-term rentals, because having those just becoming.
We gave you that power.
Right. So
Create
we're
that
starting
ordinance.
that up now to do that, because that's of course the complementary question to those.
It is indeed.
Thank you for coming all this way.
Well, thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Yeah.
Good luck. You've got
Oh,
a lot
thanks.
on your plate, just in
Thank you
this
for all your
area.
work.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
wish you
Thank you,
well.
Helen. It's good to see you.
Good to
Yes,
see
yes, I
you.
should have acknowledged the former colleague.
Yeah.
in
Well,
the
we
Senate.
call her senator because she's still, you know, once a senator, always a senator.
She's been known to come
You
back.
bailed me out of the education committee. It's good to see a female